Real Madrid was coming off a very successful 2023-24 season where they won the league and also the Champions League. And going into the off-season for the 2024-25 campaign, Real Madrid would see some departures. Center-back Nacho Fernandez left for Saudi Arabia. Joselu experienced a wonderful loan spell with Real Madrid last season, and as a result, Real Madrid triggered the option to buy clause and bought him and then immediately sold him to Qatar. And finally, the most significant of them all, Toni Kroos announced his retirement. This was actually quite the shock for some of his teammates, but now with him gone, there was a massive hole for Real to fill in the midfield. This would even be difficult for the brilliant youngsters that Real Madrid had bought, like Camavinga and Tchouaméni, because Kroos' influence and skill set is damn near irreplaceable. Already not great, but with how Real went all in on a Galactico signing last season, it left the club with some pretty thin depth in midfield and especially in the defense. After Nacho departed, the only two senior center backs Real Madrid had now was Eder Militao and Antonio Rudiger. David Alaba was still in the squad too, but he wouldn't be back until 2025. Over in the right back position, it was just Dani Carvajal. That's it. So with all these issues that could end in disaster with one single domino falling, Real Madrid addressed these issues by going all in on the Galacticos again. Oh man, Vinny Jr., Rodrigo, and now Mbappe? The world must be trembling. 3 wingers, no number 9, and no depth anywhere else. I get that Dark Lord Florentino Perez had been having Discord E-dates with Mbappe for 3 years now, but did no one think to, I don't know, maybe look at history? Anyways, Mbappe's start to life in Madrid was not great. Even before he officially signed, he gained so many haters because the guy just could not keep his mouth shut about Real, not even before the Euros. And after going extinct throughout most of the tournament, it wasn't just Paris that hated him, it was the entirety of France now. It was obviously going to take time to adapt, but in his first few months with the club, Mbappe looked awful. His first 11 league games saw 6 goals. In the Champions League, he had just 1 goal in 4 games. And in general, he was just a liability. Finishing was awful, he was playing like pre-World Cup Kubo, and also his timing was worse than a Macwell-vid. In fact, in his first Clasico, he set a record after being called offside 8 different times. And then to add insult to injury, Real Madrid was humiliated 4-0 by Barcelona. At home. It was far from enough for a world-class player surrounded by the world's best. And everyone was absolutely relishing in this moment. For the first time since the peak of Pokemon Go, everyone in the world had come together in a beautiful harmony, all to witness a once-in-a-lifetime hate watch. Outside of Mbappe though, Real was pretty underwhelming even from the very start when they drew with Mallorca. After 12 games, Madrid sat second in La Liga, already 6 points behind Barcelona. They were also 18th in the Champions League after losing 3-1 to Milan in early November. No. And oh no! The thing we all expected to happen eventually happened! Because of match congestion, something Ancelotti had stressed about months prior, Madrid suffered many injuries to players like Tchouaméni, Bellingham, and Camavinga. The team could manage it for the most part, but then long-term ACL injuries to Carvajal in October and Eder Militao in November sent Real crashing down like a Boeing flight in 2025. So now the only center-backs available for the club were Antonio Rudiger and EDP. And if that wasn't bad enough, remember the right back position? And things got progressively worse over the next few weeks, with the smallest injury being able to cause a complete meltdown in the squad. Ancelotti was now finding himself having to not only overwork the limited amount of trusted players he had, but also many of them were doing this out of position. And no player had it worse than Aurelien Tchouaméni. Tchouaméni was already struggling to fill in the shoes of the irreplaceable Toni Kroos. It also didn't really help that he was a sitting duck with 5 attackers in front of him. Then when the inevitable defender crisis happened, Ancelotti needed someone to play that position from time to time because he only had 2 players. So he picked Aurelien Tchouaméni, and that also didn't work. So with the defense looking less stable than the Haitian government right now, at this point Real Madrid just had to rely on the high-end talent in attack to bail out the rest of the team every game. Well. However, it did help that Mbappe was finally starting to find a flow throughout the month of December. But again, Real Madrid's defense, to the shock of absolutely no one, looked as shaky as I would be if Pink Panthers pulled this stance in front of me. In December, Real Madrid only had 1 clean sheet in 6 games. This included a 3-all draw with their hipster neighbors and losses to Liverpool in the Champions League and Bilbao in La Liga. And by the end of the year in the Champions League, Real Madrid sat 20th, just 2 points from danger. However, on the contrary, Real were second in La Liga, just a point away from the top. This was still significantly below the towering expectations for the season, but fortunately for Los Blancos, Barcelona went from winning 11 out of their first 12 to seeing their form practically die with just one win in their last 7 matches. This was a massive break for Real Madrid though. Their foolish rivals couldn't even take advantage of Los Blancos at their worst. And now they shall be punished by the great Real Madrid. Quickly, the reinforcements to bring stability back arrived. Absolutely no one. That's right, instead of learning from their mistakes, Real just said, nah, things are fine. I mean, hey, David Alaba is back. Now we have 3 center backs, and Courtois' been back for a couple months too. Oh, what's that, the right back position? Ah, you viewers are just as foolish as Barcelona. Have you already forgotten about Real Madrid's Ferraris in attack? January was light work for Los Blancos. They won their last 2 Champions League games to qualify for the playoff round, and then won 3 straight in La Liga. Just ignore where their opponents were in the table and the fact that Real only beat Valencia because of this. But hey, top of the table, 2 points clear, but oh no, the thing we all expected to happen inevitably happened again! Real Madrid began February losing 1-0 to Espanyol, and in the process they also lost Antonio Rudiger to an injury that would see him miss a crucial first leg versus Man City in the Champions League playoff round. David Alaba suffered yet another setback a few days later, so he was also out for that game. Then, following a very shaky performance versus Leganes in the Copa del Rey, the only quote-unquote right back, Lucas Vazquez, went down and would also miss the first leg. And so the new right back would be Mr. Versatile Federico Valverde himself, and everyone give a warm welcome back to hell for Mr. Tchouaméni. Against City, he would start at center back, and within just 20 minutes, Real conceded. Have no fear though, Madridistas, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle is here. Yeah, he definitely didn't mean that shit. However, his heroics would be cancelled out as Dani Ceballos gives away a penalty with less than 10 minutes to go. And yes, Dani Ceballos still has a contract with this club. Luckily for Los Blancos, current Man City was practically them but significantly worse, and in a matter of just 6 minutes, Real Madrid came back to win 3-2. Then, in the following week, with Rudiger now back for the second leg, Mbappe took advantage of City's crushed morale to help Real Madrid advance to the last 16. Back home in La Liga, however, Real Madrid extended their winless run to 3, but were able to bounce back for Girona to stay tied for the top with Barcelona at the end of February. However, to begin March, Real lost again, this time to Real Betis. Los Blancos then carried these uninspiring performances into their last 16 first leg game versus Atleti, but once again, the high-end talent comes to the rescue as Brahim Diaz dances through the defense to score the winner. And it only took 1 minute in the second leg for Real's defense to cancel it out. This game would go on to a penalty shootout, and once more Real Madrid catch a break because Julian Alvarez's penalty was disallowed. The club did suffer another injury though, to their left back Ferland Mendy. Luckily though, David Alaba was back to cover this role, but with all of his recent injuries and age, he still hasn't really gotten up to form yet. Anyways, Los Blancos would go on to finish the rest of March with 3 consecutive league wins to stay in the fight to retain their title. Into April, Real nearly fumble away the Copa del Rey final in a 4-all draw with Sociedad in the second leg, and then 4 days later they get a taste of their own medicine and concede a last-minute winner to Valencia at home. Not exactly how Real Madrid wanted to go into a Champions League quarterfinal match against Arsenal, but, say it with me now, and once again, they caught another break. Unlike Real, Arsenal started the season with fantastic depth at the defense, but somehow, some way, an injury crisis took out all but about 4 players. This included one of Arsenal's best center backs, Gabriel, who had just suffered a season-ending injury a few days prior. And while Real doesn't have an actual number 9 up top, they at least have forwards, unlike the Gunners who lost all of them to injury and now were forced to play midfielder Mikel Merino up top. So despite Real's own struggles and shortcomings, luckily they didn't have it as bad as Arsenal, so they were still heavily favored to win this tie. Wait, but this isn't even PSG!
It's Declan Rice! And Rice goes again! And again! First time!
It was only a matter of time that Real Madrid's neglect for its defense and midfield would catastrophically explode in their faces. We're talking Chernobyl levels of disastrous here. All game long, this team's defensive shape was so shambolic that it made an 18-year-old left back look like prime Yaya Toure. Now you could say Real got lucky Arsenal had a midfielder up top because it could have been so much worse, but I would argue that they were lucky to have Courtois in net because without him, Real could have deadass conceded 4 more to a team with no forward. Speaking of goals, conceding to a man who just transformed into a Brazilian midway through the game, I'll allow it. conceding to said midfielder up top? This guy had better finishing than Mbappe. To really put into perspective of how bad Real Madrid's attack was, they didn't make a single combination in Arsenal's box throughout the entire second half. Mbappe only had 2 shots on target and spent the rest of the game being pocketed by Arsenal's bottom string center back. Vini Jr. and Rodrigo both combined for 0 shots on target and also looked less Brazilian than Martinelli. How do you even do that? A few days later, Real let out their frustrations, and I mean that literally. Mbappe was out there trying to break someone's leg. Despite being 3-0 down though, there was all this talk about a comeback at home. During the build-up, fans of the club were chirping, and the media was shoving it down everyone's throats. Yeah, let's just not even address how bad Real Madrid's attack was in the first leg, how all 4 of their star forwards were invisible, how Bellingham had circles ran around him by an 18-year-old kid. Nah, let's just forget that. We came back against City a few years ago and we looked down and out, and this is Arsenal. They're way worse. And as the second leg got closer, the mouths got louder. The media was talking about how Real Madrid had a different mentality now, and that the club had something special prepared for Arsenal. And El Chiringuito in particular, just like their idol Mbappe, just never learned to shut the fuck up. Vini Jr. then posted this on his Instagram story a day before the game. Also, who the fuck uses a chili emoji for themselves? And then just hours before the match, we started seeing the phrase 90 minutes at the Bernabeu is a very long time everywhere. Even the club was playing into the gimmick by posting a video of them asking ChatGPT to show the phrase in multiple languages. Dumbass admin not knowing what Google Translate is aside, Real Madrid better back all this up. And so the quest for La Remontada commences. Just a minute in, Madrid's press forces Arsenal into an error, a cross finds Mbappe unmarked, and he's never beaten the allegations. A promising start, however the midfield and defense would quickly start to show early warning signs, and then EDP gives away a penalty not even 10 minutes in. Fortunately though, Courtois comes up with the heroics and the team catches the 800th break of the campaign. Now though, momentum is on their side, and just 10 minutes later, Real are awarded their own penalty. However, on second glimpse, you can see that Mbappe does a terrible job of selling this, and the penalty is called off. Before this even happened though, Real Madrid was facing the same exact issue they had the week prior. They couldn't break down Arsenal. And throughout the rest of the first half, it never got any better. In fact, it got worse in some regards. Because every Real Madrid build-up that lasted more than 3 seconds would have the same exact sequence of events. Move the ball to the flank, whip it into the box, defender clears, ball falls back to a Real Madrid player, and repeat. And it never worked. Knowing they couldn't just play in behind a low block, it was pretty clear that Real had ran out of ideas, and yet still, this club wouldn't shut the fuck up. During halftime, with players walking back down the tunnel, Dani Carvajal decided to talk shit to Bukayo Saka. Buddy, you're 3-0 down, go back to the hospitality deck. Now, did Real Madrid improve at all in the second half? Of course not. But don't let those spamming of lifeless crosses make you forget about that defense, because wow, is that even considered defending? Now 4-0 down on aggregate, this was pretty much over. But nevertheless, Catch a Break FC get a freebie, and with some newfound momentum, this could be the push Real need to pull off La Remontada. Instead though, they kept throwing up duds like Daniel Jones, and in the dying minutes they let Gabriel Martinelli send them off.
I'd like to ask you about the most repeated word in the changing room during these days.
Remontada.
All week long, the fans, the media, the players, even the club did all this talking, were even granted permission to close the stadium and improve the atmosphere, only to go out on that pitch and play Berhalter ball for 90 minutes and lose 5-1 on aggregate. And this isn't even taking into consideration about how dirty these fuckers played. Always going 100% into a challenge, and I don't even know if they were really going for the ball. I know Antonio Rudiger definitely wasn't. Also, how rude of Vini Jr. to schedule something with all of us and not even show up. I mean, have some courtesy, man. You're the 2024 Ballon d'Or runner-up, for God's sake. Now, I know I've talked a lot about the players and the board and, you know, the shallow depth and everything like that, but there was still plenty of quality there to play more than just cross the ball and pray. This isn't just a one-time thing with Ancelotti either. As we've seen throughout the whole season, there has been disappointing results after disappointing results. Like, you're really telling me you can't comfortably beat 19th place Valencia at home with these players? This will 100% be Ancelotti's last season with Real Madrid though, especially with the club heavily linked with club legend Xabi Alonso. But I can't help but think about how the rest of the season goes from here, because there's still 2 more Clásicos, one for the league and the Copa del Rey final, and listen, Real Madrid sure as hell ain't beating Barcelona. So for Real Madrid, it's looking like this season will end trophyless for them, outside of the UEFA Super Cup and the Club World Cup. The old one at least. Which would actually be the first time that Real Madrid has gone trophyless since 2020-21. And finally, Mbappe. Imagine causing all this drama for 3 whole years and finally making that dream move. You're now free of that club that was holding you back. Now you can finally go and win the Champions League. But in that same season that you leave this club, they go farther than you in the tournament. In fact, they're way better without you and can actually experience some serious success going forward, now that you're gone. He hasn't had a bad season, but it's definitely still been quite underwhelming for what we expected from a guy who joined specifically for more glory. This wasn't only the club saying this, by the way. Honestly, the majority of it was coming from him. So yes, the board needs to rethink things to not have such a dire situation like this season. But 26-year-old Kylian Zero Champions League's Mbappe, if you don't win this trophy next year, I'm going to have to make the first ever player-specific Legacy of Failures video on you. But what do you guys think about all of this? Do you think Real Madrid will improve and Mbappe will win the Champions League next year with, you know, a squad depth that is deeper than, I don't know, a kiddie pool? Or will they just continue going the Galactico route and forget about the rest of their team? Let me know. Of course though, a massive shout out to all our members, including Janos Balas, Luke RBB, Araisan, Brazilian Fury, Jeremiah Wusu Ajimang, Django, Anazir Makalankam, Alex Rudd, Slider Kid, Takoka Fan, Kentra Agatra, Saint Terrence, Sylvia Citrus, Rashford Enthusiast, Cheesebait, Winder Gel, Finn Likes Rugby More, Davox, The Portugizer, Polo Protos, Von Fan, Lucian Von Kreuz, Gazagers Brashakivics, A Ghostly Owl, Coney Wolves, Lickstab, Mud Tanai, Sketchy Card, Apollo, Congo Jas 1, German Sayu 7, Thrilling ADT 13, Los Milos, The James Braun, Vacinho, Jamie Vardy's 10th Red Bull, Nightwalker, Napside, Money Cash Hose, Quantavious Pork, Lilia Lover, Stewed Monk, Kev C, Dominic Griffin, Kyler Krebs, Mohammed Altanib, Nish, Patrick Barley, Rashford God 5, Raspberry Ale, and Unbroken Persona. If you'd like to become a member on the channel, there'll be a link down below and up in the annotations. You can follow my Twitter if you want, follow my Instagram if you like, follow my Twitch. Now that Arsenal have advanced to the Champions League semis, we are most definitely going to be doing some watch-alongs, especially since we're going up against PSG. But until then, I'll see you guys.